Hello everybody, happy Monday. We are going live today with Michali, and we're going to be answering a question that was asked via the AMAs that I started yesterday. So we're just going to wait for some of you to show up and for Michali to join, and we'll get right to it. Hello Michali, let me add you.
Hello.
Hey Michali, how are you? Good to see you again. Happy Monday.
Happy Monday to you too.
It must have been like a long week because it feels like forever ago that we did this, and it was less than a week ago.
It really does feel like it's probably been like 2, 3 weeks since I last saw you. It's crazy.
Exactly. We
Crazy.
both had long weeks. Okay. Anyways, the question is via the AMAs, like I said. So the question is as follows: How to improve the relationship with my mother on my own, knowing that I cannot change her. So I like that the question had the awareness of knowing that you cannot change your mom. I'm curious what you would say with this one.
Um, I think it's going to be, multifaceted because I think that there's a grieving period that happens for every human being at different points in time
Mm-hmm.
where we realize our parents are humans, not God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a really tough grief to experience
Mm-hmm.
because we a lot of times think we all start off thinking our parents are perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think that I would say one piece of this is really identifying and clarifying for oneself what are things that I really need from my mother that I'm not getting, and allowing myself to grieve, which includes feeling angry, includes feeling sad, really allowing oneself to feel those things and process those things.
Mm-hmm.
I think the another piece, I should say, is thinking about the positive things that we feel about ourselves and thinking about, which of those qualities came from our mother, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think even really complex relationships, we can do this, right? Where someone isn't a healthy person for us, but we may have gotten a similar sense of humor from
Mm-hmm.
them, or, we may be charming just like they are, or whatever it is. Or even if it's, I have a similar smile to them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But something that I can celebrate and say, oh, I got it from there.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And appreciate it, like bring some gratitude into the relationship
and that's
amongst
the
all the
next
other
step.
feelings. Yeah.
That's the next step. Exactly. Because I think then it's kind of like if I right now say eyebrows, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of a sudden you're going to notice my eyebrows, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to notice your eyebrows. And if other people were here, we would notice their eyebrows, right? When you bring into your consciousness something, then that's what you focus on and that's what you see. So if you bring into your consciousness this good quality that exists between the two of you, then that's what you're going to see more and more of in that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And then ask yourself, like, what can I get and what can I give in this
Mm-hmm.
relationship? And limit yourself to that if that's what's healthy for you, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if this person's mother is toxic, but for whatever reason that's between this person and themselves, they decide, I still want to have a relationship with this toxic mother. Identify what they are getting from having that relationship and what they're giving to that relationship, and then stick to those boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we go beyond that boundary, then we're setting ourselves up for pain.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that includes sharing certain things about oneself, right? If you know that's not going to be received well or in a way that's healthy for you, then that's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be the kind of thing that you're going to be talking about with your mom,
Right.
right?
Like if
So
you
it
know that you
might
can't get,
mean,
sorry, I cut you
well,
off. I was saying like if you know you can't get that emotional validation, then don't keep
exactly,
trying for it, right? Like really be really clear on like what's the intention that I want this relationship for.
exactly,
And if it's like just
exactly.
to honor them, so then it's like okay, then I know that it's like calling them however, maybe once a day or once a week to honor them. Like that's what I'm getting. I'm getting out the feeling of like that I honored them or something like that.
Exactly. And it could just be like something like, oh, we both like baking. So
Mhm.
you call up your mom and say, hey, are you available on Tuesday for half an hour to bake something together? I found
Mhm.
this really cool recipe, right?
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be deep. A lot of times, we can maintain these relationships because we want to for some reason.
Mhm.
Again, very personal reasons.
Mhm.
And they can be more superficial, but superficial doesn't equal boring or unsatisfying or not
Mhm.
meaningful. They can be filled with
Yeah.
humor and fun. It's just a different kind of relationship. And then
Mhm.
I also, the last thing I would say is to make sure that you're getting your core needs met from other places.
Mhm.
Validation, affirmation, those are attention, affection, those are core needs that belong to every human being. And then
Mhm.
we also have unique core needs that are different from person to person. And I
Mhm.
would advise this person to make sure they're getting those core needs met elsewhere so that they're not doing what you mentioned, Faye. They're not like fishing for the things that they really need from a relationship that's incapable of giving it to them.
Exactly. I love everything you said. Like every single thing, I was just like nodding, nodding, nodding. Like
Thank
I didn't even think of half the
you.
things you said, but I was like, oh my God, that's so spot on.
Thank
I'm
you.
thinking if
That's
there's
so
anything I
sweet.
have to add. I think the first thing that came to mind is like really set your expectations like in a healthy way. Like not every relationship can be resolved to the level that you want it to be resolved. And like in this question, I got that like emotion that like this person is
Yeah.
trying to have a certain sense of like a certain relationship, even though they're like, I know I can't change her. This goes for any relationship. Like every relationship has its limits, has its boundaries, and like sometimes you're not the one that sets those boundaries. And the best thing you can do for yourself is like accept that there's only so much you can do to change this relationship, and at the end of the day it will probably not be at the standards of a relationship that you would want, and like accepting that kind of closure that's not doesn't feel like closure, accepting that
It's
discomfort.
so painful. It's
Yeah.
so painful, but you're 100% right. One thing I just want to address, someone commented and said, what if that person is dead?
Yeah, so that.
Now, yeah, and I just want to say that's an added grief,
Mm-hmm.
sometimes people think, especially if like the person who's dead is like was an abusive person,
Mm-hmm.
that, other people might think, oh, okay, what a relief, they're dead. They can't hurt you anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes with the finality and closure that death represents is also filled with this own unique grief in these kinds of abusive, toxic relationships where
Mm-hmm.
there's now an end of hope and potential. And
Mm-hmm.
that is something that a lot of people who have been in relationships with abusive people who have passed away have to grieve. That's an added thing that they have to
Mm-hmm.
grieve. So I would say to be really gentle with yourself when it comes to that. And
Mm-hmm.
again, with that person who died, to think about what did you gain from that person? How did they impact you in a positive way? Because it
Mm-hmm.
sounds like that you already know how they impacted you in a negative way. That might
Mm-hmm.
need to be, something to process more in therapy too. But also, what can you take from them?
Mm-hmm.
Just to borrow like a Jewish analogy, right? We learn like how does Abraham come from Terach, right? I
Mm-hmm.
don't know if it's like a Rashi or something. It says that like Avram was so good and Terah worshipped idols. So what? But it's Avram learned what not to do. And that's also a valuable lesson, right? So
Mm-hmm.
you can also think about, what did I do differently in my life because I had experience with this person, right? And
Mm-hmm.
that's also a positive indirect thing that we've gotten from toxic relationships. And I
Beautiful.
think I think the last thing I'm going to say in terms of someone who's deceased is to bring those positive parts of that person into your life. So I'm going to just use the baking example again. If that person liked to bake,
Mm-hmm.
you can even say out loud while you're baking, hey mom, I'm thinking about you as I'm making these new kinds of chocolate chip cookies and I wish you were here icing these cookies with me.
Mm-hmm.
And think about them and maybe put on a song that you can dance to. Like, you can enjoy the moment, feeling them and thinking about them,
Mm-hmm.
even if they've passed away.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a high level, I think, to do that without like too much pain and grief. And I think that like goes back to your first point, like first work through the grief, and
Yeah.
that's like almost like a separate thing. I love that. And like that one more thing you brought in the Jewish thing, so I remembered Kamayim Apanim Apanim Keli Adam. So if the person's still alive, although this might work if they're not here anymore, but especially if they're alive, like we can think of, let's say, 5 or even 2 positive qualities about a person, and that can really internally, like, or energetically, like, change the energy between the 2 people. It doesn't mean, again, you're going to get that relationship that you dreamed of or that perfect relationship, but it does mean that it really, really can impact the energy between 2 people that is it's like, foundationally not the best energy. So if
I
they're,
love that. And I just love that word energetically. I think I'm going to use that in every
you can
single
have
meeting
it,
I
you can
have for the
share it,
rest of the
totally.
day.
Totally,
It's a
totally. Because it's
beautiful
I mean, like,
word.
it's brought down from, like, Shlomo Hamelech. Like, I didn't make this up.
Wow.
But it's really powerful, and I've used it in my own life, and I can say that it's powerful. Where you can really, really think about, even in, like, the simplest way of, like, you're having a meeting with somebody, with, let's say, your boss or a coworker, and, like, that you guys, like, butt heads. If an hour before the meeting or the night before, just, you're in your mind, you're like, okay, they're what could you think of? They're smart. They're they're honest, whatever positive, or they're a great parent, they're a great whatever it is, whatever you can think of positive about them, you're completely channeling the energy into something that's, like, positive, or at least less toxic. And you
I
can do this with
love
a
that.
parent, you can do this with anybody. So I think that that's, like, a really good, like, tangible skill that you can take away from this, and it's brought down in the Torah, and it works, obviously, because it's, from the truth. It is truth, and I think that that's something that, if you're on the level to use it, I don't think it's the highest level to be able to use it, but it definitely takes a certain sense of desire to change the relationship, and it sounds like this person's on that level. She said, I know I can't change her, I just want the relationship to be improved, and I think this can improve it on some level.
Yeah. And I'd imagine that it's not enough just to think about it. You have to like let yourself feel it,
Feel it,
right?
yeah, like, it has to be
Yeah.
honest and genuine, like, like, if they're, like, generous with the entire world, and you absolutely hate that because they're so selfish or stingy with you, then you probably don't want to use generous, unless you can really tap into that feeling of, like, wow, they're so giving to other people, but that's probably
Yeah.
too highly charged to use. So you really want to use something that you can feel genuinely, authentically, to your core, like, if
Mm.
they daven beautifully, you can be like, wow, they daven beautifully. Like, that's something I can really tap into and be like, they daven beautifully. Like, that's something I really respect, admire. It doesn't have to be you love that thing about them. It can just be something that's a solid something about them that you really genuinely respect and admire and can feel.
I love that. I love that. I love that it has to resonate in order to use that technique.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
because
it's not going
you're
to work.
bringing out energy. You're, like, literally creating an energy in you that's less charged negatively, and that energy is all of a sudden getting channeled towards them. That more positive energy is getting channeled towards them, which then impacts their energy towards you. And that's kind of like our whole world functions on energy. So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I don't know why, but reminds me of one last piece that I think might be helpful.
Hmm.
Is it's okay. I would say, like, while a person's kind of experimenting about how to negotiate a relationship and how to grow a
Hmm.
relationship that is a little toxic or unhealthy,
Hmm.
I think it can be helpful to taste success in interactions that feel good for you. And
Hmm.
so I would keep the interactions fairly short and timed in some
Hmm.
ways, so that you're going in very clear on what your intention is, what you're going to be doing, what you're going to say, and
Hmm.
what you're not going to say. And then you're leaving before anything negative can happen. And the
Hmm.
more consistent, experiences you have like that, the more positive feelings you're going to have towards the relationship, and you'll get
Hmm.
into that groove. So I would say it's okay to also have like shorter interactions
Hmm.
as you try to figure out where to put yourself in the relationship.
I love that. I love that. Like, as you're talking, I had this, like, vivid, like, imagery in my mind of, like, this. Let's say this woman knows that with her mother, I did, like, they both enjoy baking. So, like, you're on your way to pick up your kid from day camp, and you're like, hey ma, I have 10 minutes. I just wanted to tell you that I baked a recipe that you told me about last night, and it came out really amazing. And I did this thing and I did that thing. So you're, like, really coming in with an intention. It's time limited because your mom knows you have 10 minutes. Then you got to go. You're picking up your kid. You're sharing something that you're both have some sort of common ground on, and it's like
Yeah,
building success. Like, wow, I had a 10-minute conversation or a 7-minute conversation with my mom, and it wasn't confrontational, and it wasn't toxic, and she wasn't putting me down.
exactly.
So that's brilliant. Yeah, I love
Exactly.
that.
Thank you, Faye. Well, it's
Alrighty.
been lovely to speak with you. Thank
Likewise.
you.
Likewise. We'll see you again next week. Thank you,
I'll see you
Mihaly.
next
Thank you,
week.
everyone, for
Thank you,
tuning in.
Faye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good one. Bye bye.